Hello, good evening, and welcome to 30 Days of Doctrine. It's good to have you here. It's good to have you here. Today, we want to wrap up with one solid. Yesterday, I began to talk about something. I began to attempt the explanation regarding what is the proof, what is the historical proof that the Bible is really an ancient document. How do we know something that happened 2,000 years ago, 3,000 years ago, 5,000 years ago? How do we know things from history? Do we just believe the Bible by faith, or is there a verification means by which we know the Bible actually happened? So we began to look at all of those things yesterday, and I think I was quite I was quite burdened. I couldn't follow my script, so I didn't exactly communicate at best, the best way I could. So I'm going to try to be a lot calmer today. I'm going to follow the script, and I'm going to try to, communicate a lot better. First off, I need to start off by telling you that when we talk about the manuscript evidence, we are saying something that relates to every other thing. I mean, it's a way we know if any other thing happened in history. It's not peculiar to the Bible. It's a historic thing and not a theological thing, right? When we talk about manuscript evidence, it's a historic thing. Any historian watching this knows this, that when we want to search for what happened in history, we are looking for manuscript, among other things. So manuscript, like I said yesterday, it's like a document in its naked state. If you're writing a book, it's not a novel yet or a book yet, until it gets published, put in one pack and then published. But at the writing stage, it could be in bits and fragments. At that point, it's a manuscript, right? So when we talk about manuscript evidence, we're trying to say, okay, are there documents that have been found, all right, in their numbers? Because there are two things. When we look at a manuscript, there are two criteria we use to judge if it is truly original, if it's truly from history, if it's truly ancient. First, we want to look at the number of manuscripts. The larger the number of manuscripts, the more authentic it is. Number two, okay, for example, like I told you yesterday, if we're trying to have a debate and we're trying to verify if Corona existed, of course, there's a way to verify. Oh, yeah, your child in 50 years' time to come, your grandchildren may not believe, for some reason. And then can there be evidence that points to the fact that despite the fact that they were not there, they can know for a fact that it really happened? Yes. So I said you have to provide converging lines of evidence pointing, different kinds of evidence pointing to one thing. You can bring like 20 social media posts of people talking about Corona within that time. You can bring newspaper publications, that's a second line of evidence. You can bring a video of a newscaster talking about Corona, that's a third line of evidence. So all those lines of evidence point to one thing. So the more the social media posts you have, points to how impossible it will be to have falsified it. All right. If you have 100 social media posts on a thing and you have 10,000 social media posts on a thing, which of them likely truly happened? You see that? If you have 10 newspapers carrying a particular topic and you have 150 newspapers carrying different newspaper brands, you see that? So we're looking at the volume of manuscripts. How many documents in history do we have that actually contain this information that you are trying to say actually happened or exists? We're looking at manuscript, number of manuscripts. We're looking at how ancient or how close the manuscript is to the date of the event. If you want to get someone to talk to you about Corona right now, I think you just walk up to someone who experienced it. It's just some 4 years ago, yeah? It's not been that long. But you can have a 3-year-old who is intelligent enough to understand speech, but doesn't understand, or a 4-year-old, but doesn't understand what Corona is. He doesn't relate to the fact that such a thing is possible, that everybody's going to be locked down indoors for weeks. So the first result in that kind of instance is not that going to check, the most authentic way to know is just walking to an eyewitness, right? And which we'll come to. But then the point is to say that walking to an eyewitness is walking to someone that was really close to the event, someone that was in the experience of the event. So the closer the person is to the event, the more likely reliable their narrative is going to be. It's the same thing for documents. The closer the document, if you have a document from 2050 trying to describe Corona, and you have a document from 2021 trying to describe Corona, which of them is likely to be more accurate? You see that? If you have documents from 2097 trying to describe Corona, and you have documents from 2050 trying to describe Corona, which of them is likely to be more accurate? The one from 2050, because the closer the document to the actual date of the event, the more likely to be accurate, especially when it is in different, when it's voluminous, when there are different copies of this document. And that was the premise upon which I told you that if we follow manuscript evidence, then the most, and I'm not talking biblically, I'm not saying theologically, I'm saying historically, the most viable ancient document, the most reliable ancient document we have historically is the Bible. Let me explain that. Let me provide facts. There are different types of manuscripts. There's papyrus. Papyrus is the earliest and most fragile kind of manuscript. It was made from something like a kind of leaf. My studies, I had this, I've seen this even when I went to Bible school, and then checking online and some other places. I've seen the same information occur. So it was made from something like leaf. And okay, there's something called unicals. Those are large format formal manuscripts, and there are codices. They are called bound manuscripts. It's like, you can just check this online, right, to save time. It's like a merger between, it's different from scrolls. Scrolls you can only read one way. Manuscripts, for codices, you can read both ways, right? So these are very ancient forms of writings. And when we talk about manuscripts of the Bible, they were found in this format. They were not found in ancient hardcover textbooks. I mean, modern hardcover textbooks lying in different caves. Or, they were found in papyrus. They were found in codices. They were found in unicals. So that's one. Number two, that's one part of this series. What is the significance of those manuscripts? There are three things. Okay, before I come to that, let me list some significant findings, some significant manuscripts that have been found. Number one, I mentioned yesterday that the oldest known manuscript is P52. P there means papyrus. There's P1, P2, P10, P, but P52 is the oldest known manuscript. And I'll come to when it was found, but then P52 contains portion of the New Testament, right? And when a carbon dating was done on it, it was found to be a document from 125 AD, all right? 125 AD. It was found to be an ancient document from 125 AD. That's one of the most significant findings in the history of, oh my God, can you still hear me? Let's start writing down here. It was found to be one of the most reliable documents because of how close it is to the original event, right? And Codex Sanctus, one of the most complete New Testament manuscripts, was dated to have been written 350 AD, right? The name of the manuscript is Codex Sinaicus. So you can check that online to verify. And there's Codex, we're going to spell it, Vaticanus. That's another manuscript that was found. One of the most reliable and oldest manuscript of the New Testament. It was found to have been written 325 AD. 325 AD. Now, what way do they use to verify this manuscript? How did they verify that these manuscripts are truly from, we're not just written, maybe papyrus somehow, maybe they got papyrus and they know. There are three ways. First, is by the textual criticism, because the Bible is not the only thing that occurred as at the time the Bible was written. Talk about Old Testament portions of the Bible, and even more especially the New Testament portions of the Bible. We have the Roman Empire. We had lots of other stuff going on. So the New Testament, talking about Acts of the Apostles, the epistles, and all that, they were not the only things that were happening at the time. So one of the ways that historians know if this document is truly from ancient history is to cross-check, is to read other documents from that time of history and cross-check if they have any similarities. Oh my God. I'm told the rain is louder than my voice. I don't know, is it any better? Is it any better now? I'm trying to get as close as possible to the microphone so you can hear me. So one way they verify if it's truly from ancient history is by textual criticism. They go ahead to check if the manuscript, they analyze the manuscript and check the variations. They want to see, okay, before we look at the ancient writing styles, when you find maybe 200 different manuscripts of the Old Testament, or 10 or 20 manuscripts, you want to read all of them and check if they are saying the same things. If you have one manuscript saying something different, another manuscript saying something different, you find one book of Hebrews with something different, because now let me even give some background to this. I think I'm skipping something. There were no photocopying machines. So how come we have different copies of the same manuscript? I'll tell you. When these letters were written, when the epistles, Acts of the Apostles, all of those books were written, usually they were written with maybe an audience or a group of people in mind. First Peter, for example, was written to the churches, not to one congregation, but there are different epistles that were written to one congregation. So those epistles that were written to one congregation, because I've taught you that the nature of those epistles were authoritative. They were not suggestions. So they could also apply to the different churches that they are. All right? The Corinthian church could read it. The Romans could read it. The Ephesians could also read it. So there was the culture, especially when persecution intensified, for believers to make copies of the documents, the epistles with them, and take to other places. Especially as they spread, as persecution intensified and they spread, believers took with them photocopied and rewritten documents, rewritten photocopies of the original epistles. This is a historical fact to facilitate spread. And when persecution intensified and different emperors, even hundreds of years after, came up to burn and destroy that they were with, or they could hide a number of books. They could have 3 books in their possession and they hide it in a particular location. So that's how you got these things to spread. All right. So when we discover one manuscript in Egypt, we discover another one in Israel, in the Middle East, different places they have been discovered, and I'll give you some details, right? One way we know we verify its truism and its authenticity is to check